Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to Deb Chanel's 48th World, where we do throwback weekends. And today, which is Sunday, we're gonna do a throwback on the Golden Girls again. We're gonna be going over this episode, which was season 2, episode 18. It was titled "Forgive Me, Father," and I didn't write down when it was aired. But anyway, the summary goes into the man in Dorothy's life turns out to be a man of the cloth, which is really a teacher whom Dorothy is attracted to turns out to be a priest. But Dorothy don't even know that. Okay? Okay, the first setting we go into, we have Sophia and Rose. Sophia is looking through like a memorabilia box to find a handkerchief that she says is lucky, and she wants it for her bingo game. Rose is complaining about a driver who was blowing at her in the streets. And Sophia suggested to Rose to do some non-verbal gestures to let the driver behind her know that she wasn't feeling all the hunking that she was doing towards her. Sophia goes in and giving her non-verbal gestures such as giving her the finger, and flag plays that the referee uses when a opponent is behaving in sports, kind of unsportsmanlike behavior. And they give them that little penalty point for conducting unsportsmanlike behavior or demeanor with them playing in a game, if you get my drill. Then Rose tells Sophia these are obscenity gestures she was just using. Then Sophia said, no, it means good health, have a nice day, and would you like to squeeze something, she said. Squeeze my, I forgot what she said. Sophia was crazy. She was crazy, but we just gonna go with that. And then we have Dorothy and Blanche. They come into the kitchen area with Sophia and Rose already there, and Blanche is fussing about Dorothy about her new love interest, not asking her out, and yet she's trying to find out what's wrong with him. So Dorothy goes in to explain they have only spent 2 Saturdays working together doing charity work, and that's hardly enough to claim time to say they need to be dating. So Blanche goes on to tell Dorothy she should ask him out because it's obvious that he's too shy to ask her. Rose goes in and say maybe he just don't like you. Or he tell Blanche maybe he just don't like her. Then Dorothy looks at Rose like she's crazy or something. She's rolling her eyes up and down sideways at him. And then she says, thank you, Rose. Incidentally, Rose, you look fat. That's too funny. But then we go to Blanche, and Blanche tells Dorothy, time for salty has passed. Solidity has passed. Go on and ask him out. Then Dorothy says she doesn't know. She feels so awkward asking a man out on a date, which most women are. Okay, then Rose tells Dorothy, you can ask him to come over here for dinner. And Blanche expresses that she agrees with her. She says it's a great idea, and then we can all check him out. Then Dorothy tells Blanche she doesn't think she can do it. Blanche tells Dorothy, of course you can. So she tries to role play with Dorothy. She tells Dorothy to be frank, and she'll be her. So they all, they get up in each other's faces, and of course Blanche gets her feminine wiles going. Blanche talks to Dorothy in her sexy, sensuous way, using her body language and batting her eyes, saying to Dorothy, who's playing Frank's part about them working together for 3 Saturdays weekends, and I don't know what you like to eat. Why don't you come over to dinner this Saturday night and let me find out what whets your appetite. And then Dorothy say, she pretty much just looking at her strongly, weirdly confused. She's just having a mixed bag of emotions, looking at Blanche. Then she starts looking disgusted and tells her, and what are you serving for dessert? Penicillin? Then she goes out to say, or she goes on to say, she will handle it in her own way. So then Sophia comes in. She goes on to say to Dorothy, if you think, no, she's sitting at the table while she just finished watching Blanche and Dorothy role play. Then she said, if you do it your way, you better use Jane Fonda's body. Otherwise, it will be just us four here for dinner. Dorothy looks meanly and disgusted of Mom and stated that she leaves out, she stated, wait a minute. Okay, that's what her mom stated. She looked at her mom and she pretty much like give her the silent treatment and roll her eyes at her and then turns around and exit out the kitchen. Then we go to Frank and Dorothy. They're on their little community side job this Saturday once again. Dorothy is serving Frank a cup of coffee. He's saying thank you. They're having their little pleasantries. And they are also having a little small talk. They go over to the mats and they have a seat. And Frank makes a comment that he do eat dinner. Because after she gives him coffee, she goes in to say, I notice all the kids call you Frank, and that's good to be on a first name basis with your students and this, that, and the other. And then he goes on to say, well, yeah, I have dinner with them sometimes, and sometimes we be eating strictly on the floor. And she found him, and then since he brought up dinner, that was her time to chime in and ask him over for dinner. So she does. She asked him, he said he do eat dinner. She said, good. Why don't you come over to my house for a late night dinner, and you can meet my roommates. And he asked her, well, when can he come over? When is a good time? And she goes on through caution. She says to the wing, she goes to say, well, why don't you come over on bingo night, because that's the night that her mom goes out, and her mother's not in there, so she don't have to explain anything to her mother. So we go to a commercial, we come back, then we have Sophia. Sophia's getting ready to go for her bingo game. She done sit and got her, or found her lucky scarf. She's coming to the main meeting room, which is the den, I guess. And she tells Rose, hey Rose, I'm on my way out to my bingo game. And then Rose said, asked her, where did you finally found your handkerchief? She said, yeah. And then Rose asked Sophia, where did you find it? And then she said, in my bra. And then Rose looked crazy, like, and then she goes on to say, I had to blow it had to blow its boobs or something like that. I was like, my boobs had to blow their nose. That's funny as heck. Oh Lord, I tell you. Then Sophia exits the house. Excuse me. And then we have Blanche. Then Blanche giving Rose seating instructions for tonight's dinner with Frank and Dorothy. She tells Rose she will sit by her just in case someone wants to play footsies, which is not a game, but Rose thinks it's a game when she first hears it. And then Blanche explains to her a little bit more. Then Rose finally gets the hint of the game. Then she said, okay, I see where you're going. Then Dorothy enters the room looking all pretty in her little pink and cream ensemble or pantsuit set, and asking the girls how does she looks. And Rose said, Dorothy, you look so beautiful. And Blanche says, go back and change. She looking all disgusted at Dorothy like, you gonna run this man away with what you looking like. And then Blanche said, it's okay if you going on, a friendly date or a funeral in New Orleans, but it's too much, too subtle for this evening. She tells Dorothy to put on something flashy flashy, something colorful, in her southern accent. And then Dorothy tells Blanche that's really not her, her, flashy side is really not her. Blanche says, I know, honey. Take a chance. Be a woman. Then Dorothy says, that's asking a whole lot. But she will try, and she says it with one hand to Blanche's face, like she want to claw her eyes out. And then with the other hand, she want to seem like she just want to slap her. But Blanche says, thank you. And so Dorothy turns around and go and get herself prepared how Blanche feels she needs to be dressing for her new beau. So then we have Blanche and Rose. Blanche tells Rose, while Dorothy is going back to change clothes, let's go in the kitchen to see about supper. Both women hurry on into the kitchen area. Then we got Rose speaking to Blanche. Oh, excuse me, she's asking Blanche, does she think she's pushing Dorothy a little too hard? Blanche says, no, honey. Blanche goes in to tell Rose, Dorothy needs both our help. Shoot. Blanche goes on to tell Rose, Dorothy is not going to have too many more chances at this love thing because Dorothy doesn't have her good looks. Or Rose, she looking Rose up and down. She can't think of nothing positive or worthy to say. So she goes and tells Rose that, Dorothy just don't have all the, the wilding or feminine wiles that she has pretty much. And then she goes in to look at Rose again, and she said, honey, that's okay. We'll work on you next week. Because she could find nothing appealing to her that she could put in. Well, Dorothy don't have her good looks. She could have said, well, Rose, she don't have your sense of talking. But, when Rose over her mouth try to say something, it sometimes it's a St. Olive story, and it can go left. Or, both women, all the women have their hair together. Rose pretty much dressed like a mother, so it's nothing really sassy or flashy about her. Blanche is the only salted, sensual, sexy being in there. Okay, and that's what she would probably want to have it anyway. She don't want no competition. So she just basically tell Rose, we'll work on you next week, honey. Because you need some improvement too. So, we go to Blanche. Blanche tells Rose, Dorothy glows up every time we mention Frank's name. And she mentions, if she mentions his name, she does the same. She can't say for certain if it's love, because Rose asked Blanche prior to getting to this, do you think she's in love? And then she says, but she can see she's very smitten with him. But they can help her fire Cupid's arrow into the tushy of love. Then Rose says, the tushy of love, from some strange reason, I find that very provocative, and laughs and smiles when she's saying it. And then Blanche tells Rose, you really ought to date more. The doorbell rings, and Blanche dashes off to get the door, but she tells Rose to heat up the rolls in the, I guess, microwave or the stove, and cool herself down with all that mess she was just going on with. Rose had got hot for a minute when Blanche was talking all that sexy stuff to her. Okay, we go to Blanche. Blanche gets to the door and finds someone on her doorstep. She thought it was Frank, but she said, no, Dorothy wouldn't bring no priest here as no date, because they don't do too much anything that's, ungodly. Everything they do is godly and uplifting and this, that, and that. That's Blanche's perception. So she goes to the doorstep, and she's just waiting for either the priest to say something, or she gets tired of waiting on him, and she's just noticing what he's wearing, which is a priest type of motif. Blanche is speechless for a few seconds, not knowing what to say. However, she makes a joke and saying, my, Father, you're making late donation calls. Father, but let me get my purse. Then Frank immediately stops her and tells her he's Frank, Dorothy's friend from the church. Blanche looks startled and confused, and she blurts out, you're the hunk. Then Blanche gets very tongue-tied and starts saying, "Forgive me, Father, I'm not Catholic." And then she just goes on bumbling and babbling, and, just etc., etc., etc. She goes on to say she's a Baptist, and she invites Frank into her home, or into their home. She asks Frank to get or close the door while she pulls herself together because it's a total shock. She goes on to sit on the sofa, to play nice. So she's still kind of standing, but she's going to sit on the sofa shortly. But before that, Frank senses her uneasiness. But he goes into telling Blanche Dorothy hadn't told him so much about her. Well, he goes in and say Dorothy has told him so much about her, he almost feels like he know her. She confesses Dorothy let out some valuable information about, she said Dorothy left out some valuable information about him, though, which was that he was a priest. And then Frank has started to believe Dorothy doesn't know, and Blanche says, "You should have told her." And he just assuming, like, So Blanche tells Frank, "You think she thought you were a boring dresser?" Then Frank says she's never seen him in his clothing. Then Blanche says, "I didn't know you all took your clothes off." So, pretty much Blanche is having a thought moment. Like, come on, Blanche, pull up. Just because they're priests, they can not have to wear their priest clothes everywhere they go. They can be human as well. Then Frank says, we do a lot of what real people do. So Blanche goes on to say, "Yeah, except for one important thing." Of course, Blanche is alluding to having sex. And he gets the drill. Then Rose comes out from the kitchen like some kind of Stepford robot. She goes on to introduce herself, says it's glad to finally meet you, and that Dorothy talks about you all the time, and she glows. And then Blanche say, "Rose." And then she still continues to talk. She says when she mentions your name, and Blanche still trying to say, stop talking, Rose. And then she stands to her feet while what do you call it? Rose is still making a fool out of herself, going over about how smitten Dorothy is, with you. Then Blanche stands up firmly and holler her names very loudly, which forces Rose to just look at him while she's running her mouth. Just look at the whole man from top to bottom and what he's wearing. And then Rose does that pretty much. And then she blurts out, "He's a priest, isn't he?" And all three look confused and uneasy of the perception Rose has just finally blurted out. Then Rose goes in to tell Frank she's sorry Helltown was canceled. And then she finds herself a seat as she's looking at him and set her little biscuit butt down, because she knows she don't put her foot in her mouth. She don't talk more than she needed to. She put her, she put her foot in her mouth and she could not take it out. So she had to die slowly, but die away from them. So we had Dorothy. She finally comes out to greet Frank, and she's just, twirling on air, and she's looking flashy and beautiful and sexy. And then she quickly noticed Frank is dressed up like a priest, and she stops in mid-sentence. She goes in to tell Frank, "Please tell me that's a maroon jacket," or something to that effect. I couldn't kind of gather what she was saying. And then Blanche and excuses herself and Rose to finish checking on dinner while Dorothy kind of digests what she's just seen. And then we have Dorothy and Frank. Dorothy goes into asking Frank why didn't he tell her he was a priest. He says, I assumed you knew, but Dorothy denies knowing anything or having any of that information. Dorothy goes on to tell Frank she feels a little embarrassed, and Frank joins in and say he is too. And Frank says, "What difference does it make though? We could still be friends." And Dorothy motions for him to have a seat, and she tells him of course they can be friends. And then we have Dorothy and Frank again. Both are sitting on the opposite sides of the sofa, one on one end and the other one on the other end, looking extremely uneasy at the situation they just placed themselves in. Frank says, "You look lovely tonight." And Dorothy says she looks like the mother of a solid gold dancer. That top was a little bit too busy for me, of course, unless you were going out dancing in a club. And then Frank goes back and tells Dorothy he is truly sorry about her not knowing who he was, which was a priest. And Dorothy says she knows, but she really is hurt about it though. Then we have Rose and Blanche comes back in with appetizers, and Dorothy gets up and goes ahead of him, saying that they're eating out on the lanai, which really means patio deck. And Rose, as she's following them along, asks Blanche, now where is she supposed to be sitting again? And then Blanche goes, anywhere, you damn well please. What the hell of the difference does it make now? She discourages Rose along and pushing her along towards the patio. Then we leave that scene, go to a commercial, we come back. Dinner has been served. Everyone is back in the main sitting area. Blanche and Frank are sitting in the armchairs, and Dorothy and Rose are sitting on the sofa. Blanche is asking Frank about him becoming a teacher prior to becoming a priest. But Frank goes on to say that he was actually going to medical school to become for a year. Then he quit to become a basketball coach. Then he became a teacher. Then lastly a priest. Then Rose asks Frank, Rose asked Frank what do he think he would do next. Like, come on, Rose, the man is what, in his retirement age? Are you are you serious? That's when Dorothy gets up off the sofa and asks everyone or anyone would they like more coffee. And because she has another pot brewing, and Blanche gets up to go help her in the kitchen. Then Rose goes in to tell Frank that black is his color. She goes on to ask Frank, was that a deciding factor that made him choose to choose to enter into the priesthood? Frank's look at her perplexed and in amazement of what's coming out of her mouth. I mean, come on, Rose, pull up. Then we have Blanche and Dorothy there in the kitchen area. Blanche tells Dorothy it wasn't that bad of an evening. It was quite nice, and she planned for the two of them to have, but it still was a pleasant evening. It wasn't what she wanted them to have, which was a lot of sultry stuff going on, a lot of hand touching, a lot of footsies going on. But hey, it is what it is. Dorothy agreed with her, calling Frank a very special man. Blanche goes on to tell Dorothy Frank feels the same way about her too, and Dorothy says, yes, we are friends. Blanche tells Dorothy she hesitates to say this, but she feels in Frank's eyes he sees you more than just a friend. Dorothy is listening and still pouring coffee into the cups. Dorothy tells Blanche the man is a priest. Blanche says a man is still a man. Dorothy tells her she's not listening to this nonsense anymore. Blanche goes on to tell Dorothy she was in a similar situation, and it was just too much for the both of them. And they finally gave into their emotions and their feelings and checked into the Best Western. The Best Western Hotel. Woo, Blanche is crazy. And then Dorothy's looking at her in wildly amazement. And Dorothy said, you had an affair with a priest? Blanche says, who said anything about a priest? I said a man of a cloth. He was a fabric salesman. And then Dorothy looked like she wanted to slap the shit out of her. Blanche goes in to tell Dorothy it's something in his eyes that's telling her that Frank wants her in a biblical sense. Dorothy rushes out the kitchen to serve up some more coffee to the group because she don't want to listen to none of Blanche saying, especially when she was under the assumption that when Blanche said a similar situation, she actually thought that she was trying to date a priest herself, but she talking about a doggone fabric salesman. So she was too disgusted with Blanche. So we go and we have Sophia comes home to find the ladies in the den area, and Dorothy addresses her saying the bingo game is over already. And it's so soon. And then Sophia goes into telling the ladies and gentlemen it was a travesty of a bingo game and that she believes it was fixed. She goes on to say she told them she's going to get Hugh Donahue to come by and investigate them. Sophia walks over to Frank and said, they sent you over to shut me up. Then Dorothy stands up to introduce Frank Leahy, which is Frank, to her mother. Sophia says, pleased to meet you. Sophia goes in to tell Dorothy, what happened to your date? Rose interjects and tells Sophia, Father Leahy is her date. Then Sophia gives him a once over again, and she points to her daughter Dorothy to come with her to the hall area, going towards where their bedroom areas are for a moment, so they can talk this situation over. Sophia, Dorothy goes over to the middle of the hall, and Sophia quietly tells Dorothy, sometimes her mother gets a little busy and forget to tell her something in life or about life that a young lady should know. Dorothy's listening very intensely to her, waiting for her to get to what she really needs to say. Then Sophia goes on to say, don't date a priest. It's bad luck. Dorothy says, Mom, like she's not going to believe that. And Sophia says, trust me, what happened to her at bingo tonight was no accident. Then Sophia leaves her and goes to her room. Then we have Frank. Frank acknowledges how late it is and has, wait a minute. Okay, he acknowledges how late it has been, and he stands up on motioning to leave when Dorothy goes to let him out and says she's looking forward to seeing him on Saturday. But Frank goes on to say he hopes to see her before that, and she's looking perplexed, and he tells her prior to going home for the evening, Frank says that from tonight's dinner and spending more time with her in her surroundings, he's thinking about leaving the church. And Dorothy is still looking confused and stunned. Rose has her mouth wide open as she's watching Pastor a priest Leahy leaving. And Dorothy looks at him leaving, from the driveway, getting in his car, pulling off, and in astonishment of what she just heard him say to her. She closed the door, she turns around, looks at Blanche looking at her confused, then she look at Rose confused. Then commercial comes. We come back, we have Dorothy's asking Rose where has she been, and Rose is explaining to Dorothy she went out to get some provisions, meaning comfort food, because after what Frank said to you, I knew we were going to be up all night talking about the situation. Then Blanche chimes in and say, no, you're going to go to sleep. But Dorothy said, well, okay. Blanche had tried to tell Rose, but after hearing what Rose had brought, such as cheesecake and ice cream, it was hard to pass that up. So she was giving out orders, telling Blanche to go cut the cake, and she'll get the plates for the ice cream, or the bowls for the ice cream. Then we had Dorothy. She's just uneased about separating Frank from the calling, from his calling from God. Then Rose goes on to tell them a St. Olive story. Sophia comes in to rubbing it in on Dorothy, telling the woman she only sees two God-fearing women, and she don't know what to say about her own daughter, turning a preacher away from his parishioners. Woo, from God. And Dorothy is telling Ma to get off her case. She feels bad enough. Sophia also tells Dorothy 81 years of eating fish on Friday, even though the Pope told her she didn't have to. She goes to Mass. She lights candles. She sings Catholic songs. And for what? It's all been going down the toilet because Dorothy insists on going out with the father. Well, she insists on going out with Father Happy Pants. Then Sophia tells Dorothy, her daughter, it's her decision. If she wants to continue dating the priest, she will stand with her 100%. Then she tells her, Pussycat, good night. Then Sophia leaves the room. Okay, then we're into the next day. Sophia goes into one of the confessions booths at the Catholic Church to talk with the clergyman, but she's really thinking she's talking to Frank. I don't know what gave Sophia the idea that it's not but one priest in the church, and it has to be Frank, and he's there 24 hours a day, or how long the church is open for people to come in and confess their sins in the booth. So like I said, she's under the assumption that she's talking to Frank and not anybody else. But Sophia's dropping personal information about her daughter. She's going in and tell her it wouldn't be a wise choice that they got together because she's divorced, and we know, you know, you don't want to be down in there burning for marrying a divorced woman. And, you know, just dropping all kinds of tea on Dorothy. And the priest that's in there listening to all this, he just dumbfounded. He just really dumbfounded. And he never comes out. But then we have Dorothy and Frank. They're actually outside in the same Catholic church that Sophia's at. And they're having their discussion about all the misunderstandings they've had since they've been having a friendship. So Dorothy is going on to see Frank and about telling him not to stop being a priest because of her. Frank goes on the thought of what Dorothy is saying, and he starts to laugh out loud, thinking, you know, how, you know, they keep being on different roads of understanding the situations. Frank goes on to tell her he's sorry, and it seems their entire relationship is one misunderstanding after another. Dorothy finally understands where their relationship is, and totally understood totally understood it entirely, because he first thought Frank was losing his mind, and, you know, what she was saying about she being the main cause for him leaving the priesthood. Stop it, Elijah. And he was like, Dorothy, I'm not leaving the priesthood. I'm just taking a teaching position. I'm just not going to be a man in the cloth in the church, you know, counseling people that come in. I'd rather be a teacher. And that's cool. And then, you know, Dorothy understands what he's saying. Kind of embarrassed again, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, Sophia is still confessing to a priest she thinks is Frank. Still dropping tea, telling him what to do, leave her alone, this, that, and that, or, you know, hell gonna come on her daughter and hell gonna come on him. But whatever. Then Dorothy agrees, you know, they're pretty much finna finalize another date, but it's copacetic. It's, you know, them being very platonic with one another and just becoming friends. Dorothy agrees to have another date with Frank, and Dorothy is asking who's paying because she don't want to assume anything, and he says let's do Dutch, and meaning, you know, you pay for your meal, I pay for mine. And they hug one another, and when Sophia comes out of the confession room to find them both hugging, and she doesn't know what to think, she just says, okay, I warned you. I throw my hands up, and she leaves like in disgust. And they both just laugh at her in a sense, and just like, okay, she must got the misunderstanding too. So I am sure, Dorothy is gonna have to go and explain everything to all of them, and they're gonna give her lots of hugs and this and that and the other. But again, it was a good episode. I hope y'all enjoyed. I hope you're having a safe and wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And I will see you again for a throwback Saturday or Sunday, which I did it on Sunday instead of Saturday. I took a day off from taping. So, okay, guys, enjoy yourself. Be blessed. And blessings to you and your family. Good night.